Millionaire gave his maid an old dress, but was shocked when he saw her coming down the stairs. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Isabella Martinez moved silently through the pristine halls of the Blackwood mansion, her practiced steps barely making a sound on the polished marble floors. The crystal chandeliers cast their golden light across immaculate furniture, creating shadows that she had learned to navigate like a ghost. For 5 years, she had perfected the art of invisibility in this palace of opulence. The mansion was a perfect reflection of its owner, Alexander Blackwood. Powerful, meticulous, and coldly beautiful, every surface gleamed with the same ruthless perfection that had built his business empire. At 38, he was already one of the most influential men in the city, known for his analytical mind and unwavering control. Isabella had watched him from the shadows, observing how he commanded rooms full of powerful people with nothing more than a raised eyebrow or a slight gesture. She had learned his habits, his preferences, the exact way he liked his coffee served in the morning. Black, no sugar in the blue porcelain cup, and the precise temperature he preferred his office to be maintained at, 72 degrees, never warmer. But he had never really seen her. Oh, he knew she existed. She was part of the well-oiled machine that kept his perfect world running smoothly. But she was like the air conditioning or the security system, essential but unremarkable. He had never been unkind, but neither had he shown any particular warmth. She was simply there, doing her job with quiet efficiency. What he didn't know was that before she came to work in his mansion, Isabella had dreams of her own. Her childhood had been filled with the soft whisper of fabric and the rhythmic click of sewing needles, learning at her grandmother's knee. Maria Elena had been one of the city's most respected seamstresses, creating masterpieces that transformed ordinary women into visions of elegance. But life had taken unexpected turns, and now those dreams lay buried beneath years of serving others. The summons to his office that afternoon came as a complete surprise. Isabella's heart pounded as she made her way through the familiar corridors, her mind racing through possible scenarios. Had she made a mistake? Was there some flaw in her work that had finally caught his attention? The office door loomed before her, its dark wood gleaming with the same intimidating perfection as everything else in the mansion. She knocked softly, waiting for his response. "Enter." His voice was cool and controlled as always. Isabella stepped inside, immediately struck by the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Alexander stood with his back. To her, his tall frame silhouetted against the city skyline. He was wearing one of his impeccable suits, dark gray today, cut to perfection across his broad shoulders. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Blackwood?" He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Those steel-gray eyes studied her for a moment, and Isabella felt herself holding her breath. She had never been this close to him before, had never had his full attention focused solely on her. It was unsettling. "There will be an important reception for my company next week," he said finally, his tone matter-of-fact. "I want you to accompany me." Isabella blinked, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry?" "The reception," he repeated, as if speaking to a child. "You will attend as my companion." The words hung in the air between them, surreal and impossible. Isabella's mind struggled to process what she was hearing. Alexander Blackwood could have any woman he wanted. Models, actresses, socialites. Why would he choose his housekeeper to accompany him to what would undoubtedly be a high-profile event? "Sir, she began, but he cut her off with a slight wave of his hand. "That will be all. I'll have the details sent to your room." And just like that, she was dismissed. Isabella left the office in a daze, her thoughts whirling. As she made her way back through the mansion's corridors, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in her carefully ordered world. She had no way of knowing then that this was only the beginning, that the game Alexander Blackwood was playing was far more complex than she could imagine. And she certainly had no idea that she was about to become the key player in a story that would transform both their lives forever. 3 days after the unexpected meeting in Alexander's office, Isabella found a large black velvet box waiting on her bed. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the lid, not knowing what to expect. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a dress that made her heart sink. It was clearly expensive once, perhaps even designer, but now it was a shadow of its former glory. The silk was dulled with age, the seams showing wear, and small tears marred what must have been beautiful beadwork. A simple card lay atop the fabric, bearing only 2 words in Alexander's precise handwriting: "For tonight." Isabella sat heavily on the edge of her bed, the reality of the situation dawning on her. This wasn't an honor, it was a setup. He wanted her to appear at his side looking exactly like what she was, a servant, trying desperately to fit into a world that wasn't hers. The humiliation would be exquisite, carefully orchestrated to remind her of her place. Anger flared in her, chest hot and bright. She thought of her grandmother, of the magic she could work with needle and thread, of the lessons learned in those quiet afternoons of her childhood. A plan began to form in her mind. Without hesitation, she wrapped the dress carefully in a garment bag and left the mansion. Her destination was a small atelier tucked away in the old part of the city, where narrow cobblestone streets wound between ancient buildings. The bell above the door chimed softly as she entered. "Madame Rossi," she called out, her voice echoing in the quiet shop. An elderly woman emerged from the back room, her silver hair elegantly styled and her clothes simple but immaculate. Her sharp eyes took in Isabella and the garment bag she carried. "Ah, Maria Elena's granddaughter," she said, a slight smile crossing her face. "It's been many years." Isabella hadn't expected to be remembered. "You knew my grandmother?" "Of course, she was one of the finest seamstresses I've ever known. We worked together often before." She trailed off delicately. "But you're not here to discuss the past, are you? Show me what you've brought." Isabella carefully laid out the dress on the workroom table. Madame Rossi's experienced hands moved over the fabric, assessing every flaw and imperfection. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes sparkled with interest. "This is a Valentino," she said finally. "Probably from the early 2000s. Expensive, very expensive, but deliberately damaged. Someone wants you to fail, my dear." Isabella nodded. "Can you help me prove them wrong?" The older woman's smile widened. "We have 6 hours. It will be tight, but..." She paused, studying Isabella's face. "Your grandmother taught you the basics, yes? Everything she knew until I was 16. Good. Then we work together. Take off your jacket. We have no time to waste." What followed was a masterclass in haute couture restoration. Madame Rossi's skilled hands guided Isabella through the intricate work of reinforcing seams, replacing damaged beading and carefully restructuring the dress's silhouette. They worked in comfortable silence, broken only by quiet instructions and the hum of the sewing machine. As the afternoon light faded into evening, Isabella stood before the mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The dress had been transformed. Where once it had been a tool of humiliation, it was now a weapon of elegance. The silk had been carefully steamed and treated, regaining its original luster. The beadwork, repaired with vintage crystals from Madame Rossi's private collection, caught the light with every movement. But more than that, the dress had been subtly altered to fit her perfectly, emphasizing her natural grace. It wasn't flashy or overwhelming. Instead, it possessed a quiet sophistication that would be impossible to ignore. "Perfect," Madame Rossi said softly. "You look exactly like your grandmother when she was young. She would be proud." Isabella felt tears threatening but blinked them away. "How much do I owe you?" The older woman waved her hand dismissively. "Consider it an investment in your future, but you must promise me one thing. Anything. When the time comes, and it will come, you must remember this day. Remember that true elegance isn't about money or power. It's about knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone make you feel less than that." As Isabella made her way back to the mansion, the dress now a perfect fit in its garment bag. She felt something she hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. In a few hours she would walk into that reception and face Alexander Blackwood's carefully planned humiliation. But she wasn't walking in as a servant playing dress-up. She was walking in as her grandmother's granddaughter, carrying generations of skill and pride in every stitch of her transformed dress. Let him play his games. She was ready to show him exactly who she really was. The Blackwood Industries annual reception was held at the Grand Plaza Hotel, a historic building whose marble facade gleamed golden in the evening light. Luxury. Cars lined the circular driveway, disgorging the city's elite onto a red carpet that led to the grand entrance. Isabella watched from her taxi as women in designer gowns and men in bespoke suits made their way inside, their jewelry catching the light of dozens of camera flashes. For a moment, doubt crept in. What was she thinking? These people belonged to a different world. A world of old money, social connections, and inherited privilege. But then she caught her reflection in the taxi's window and straightened her spine. The woman looking back at her wasn't a servant anymore. She was every inch her grandmother's heir. "Ma'am," the doorman said, holding out his hand to help her. From the taxi, Isabella accepted it with a gracious smile, one that her grandmother had taught her years ago. Head high, shoulders back, she ascended the carpeted steps as if she'd been doing it all her life. The ballroom was a symphony of crystal and gold, with enormous chandeliers casting warm light over the assembled guests. Conversations hummed, punctuated by the gentle clink of champagne glasses and distant classical music. Isabella accepted a glass from a passing waiter, using it more as a prop than a drink as she scanned the room. "Well, well," a voice drawled behind her. "What have we here?" Isabella turned to find Victoria Sterling, one of the city's most prominent socialites, examining her with barely concealed disdain. Victoria was known for her sharp tongue and sharper social instincts. If anyone could spot an imposter, it would be her. "That's an interesting dress," Victoria continued, her voice carrying just enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. "I could swear I've seen it before. Last season, perhaps, or was it the season before?" A small circle of onlookers had formed, waiting for Isabella to crumble under the scrutiny. Instead, she took a small sip of her champagne, letting the moment stretch. "How observant of you, Mrs. Sterling," Isabella replied, her voice warm and confident. "This is indeed a vintage Valentino, recently restored by Madame Rossi. You know her work, of course?" Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. Madame Rossi was a legend in certain circles, known for her discretion and her waiting list that stretched for months. "Madame Rossi no longer takes new clients," Victoria said, but there was a note of uncertainty in her voice now. "She makes exceptions for old friends," Isabella replied smoothly. "My grandmother, Maria Elena, used to work with her frequently." A ripple of recognition went through the crowd. Maria Elena's name still carried weight in these circles, even years after she had retired. Victoria's expression flickered. She had just made the mistake of publicly challenging someone with legitimate connections to two fashion legends. "Maria Elena was your grandmother." Another woman stepped forward, her face alight with interest. "She made my debut gown years ago. It was the most beautiful dress I've ever worn." The conversation shifted, with several other women joining in to share their own memories of Maria Elena's work. Isabella found herself at the center of a growing circle, fielding questions about vintage fashion and restoration techniques with the expertise she'd inherited from years of watching her grandmother work. And then the crowd parted, and Alexander Blackwood was there. He stood in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, watching the scene unfold with an expression Isabella couldn't quite read. Their eyes met across the circle of admirers, and for a moment everything else faded away. He had expected to find her hiding in a corner, embarrassed and out of place. Instead, she was holding court like a natural-born queen. Without breaking eye contact, Isabella excused herself from her newfound admirers and made her way toward him. Each step was measured, confident, the dress moving with fluid grace around her. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, coming to stand before him, "thank you for the invitation." His eyes traveled slowly from her perfectly styled hair to the transformed dress, taking in every detail. "That's not the dress I sent you." "It is, actually." Isabella allowed herself a small smile. "Just not quite as you intended it to be." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or appreciation. Before he could respond, they were interrupted by the arrival of James Chen, one of Alexander's biggest potential investors. "Blackwood," Chen called out jovially, "aren't you going to introduce me to your charming companion?" Alexander's hand came to rest at the small of Isabella's back, the touch sending an unexpected shiver up her spine. "James, this is Isabella Martinez. Isabella, James Chen of Chen Global Industries." "Miss Martinez," Chen said, taking her hand. "That name sounds familiar. Any relation to Maria Elena Martinez?" Isabella felt Alexander's hand tense against her back. "My grandmother," she confirmed. "Did you know her?" "Know her. My wife still talks about the wedding dress she made for our daughter. Tell me, do you follow in her footsteps?" The conversation flowed easily from there, with Isabella drawing on years of overheard business discussions in Alexander's house to contribute meaningfully to the dialogue. She watched from the corner of her eye as Alexander's expression shifted from surprise to genuine interest. By the end of the evening, she had made connections with half the room, discussed potential business opportunities with 3 different investors, and even received an invitation to join the board of the city's prestigious Fashion History Museum. As they stood waiting for their cars at the end of the night, Alexander finally spoke. "You surprised me tonight." Isabella turned to face him, emboldened by her success. "That was your mistake, Mr. Blackwood. You thought you knew exactly who I was, but you never really looked." Their cars arrived simultaneously, but before Isabella could step toward hers, Alexander caught her wrist. His touch was gentle but insistent. "Tomorrow morning," he said, his voice low. "My office, 9 o'clock. It wasn't a request. Isabella nodded once, then pulled her wrist free and walked to her waiting car. As she was driven away, she could feel his eyes following her, and she smiled to herself in the darkness. The game had changed tonight, but somehow she knew this was just the beginning. The morning after the reception dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the mansion's windows as Isabella made her way to Alexander's office. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the previous night, analyzing every interaction, every glance, every unspoken challenge. She wore a simple but elegant black dress today, one of her own, purchased with carefully saved money. No more borrowed clothes, no more playing along with someone else's script. Whatever happened in this meeting, she would face it on her own terms. The office door was open when she arrived, but Alexander wasn't behind his desk. Instead, he stood at the window, just as he had during their last meeting. But something was different today. There was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Close the door," he said, without turning around. Isabella did as she was told, then waited. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Alexander turned to face her. He looked as immaculate as ever in a charcoal grey suit, but there were shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept much either. "You made quite an impression last night," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "James Chen called me this morning. He wants to move forward with the merger we've been discussing for months. Apparently his wife was very impressed with you." Isabella remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Victoria Sterling's husband also called, and Richard Thompson from the Fashion History Museum board. "Do you know what they all wanted to discuss?" He didn't wait for her answer. "You, the mysterious Isabella Martinez, granddaughter of the legendary Maria Elena, who appeared out of nowhere and charmed the entire room." He moved to his desk, picking up a folder. "So I did some research. Your grandmother's business was quite successful before she retired. She had connections throughout the fashion industry, contacts that could be very valuable. And you." He looked up at her, his eyes intense. "I've been here for 5 years, watching, listening, learning how this world works." "Is that why you sent me that dress?" Isabella asked, finding her voice. "To test me?" A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I wanted to see what you would do. Would you wear it as it was and humiliate yourself? Would you refuse to attend? Or would you find a way to turn it to your advantage? He set the folder down. You exceeded my expectations. I'm not here to play games, Mr. Blackwood, Isabella said firmly. If you want to dismiss me for what happened last night, just say it. Dismiss you? He actually laughed, a short, surprising sound. No, Isabella, I want to promote you. She blinked, caught off guard. What? I need an assistant who understands both the business world and the social scene. Someone who can navigate complex relationships and spot opportunities I might miss. Last night proved you can do that. He paused, studying her reaction. The position comes with a significant salary increase, of course. Your own office, a clothing allowance. Isabella's mind raced. This wasn't at all what she had expected. And what exactly would this position entail? You would work directly with me, attend meetings, help negotiate deals, manage social events. But, he held up a hand as she opened her mouth to speak, I have one condition. Of course he did. Men like Alexander Blackwood always had conditions. And that would be? I want you to help Madame Rossi expand her business. Those contacts you made last night. Use them, build something. Show me what you can do with real resources behind you. Isabella stared at him, trying to understand his angle. Why? Alexander moved around the desk until he stood directly in front of her. This close, she could see the flecks of silver in his grey eyes, smell the subtle notes of his expensive cologne. Because you intrigue me, Isabella Martinez. You've worked in my house for 5 years, and I never really saw you until last night. I want to know what else I've been missing. The air between them felt charged, electric with possibility. Isabella took a careful breath, considering her options. She could walk away now, find another job, start fresh somewhere else, or she could accept his offer and step into a world of opportunity she had only dreamed about. But she wouldn't do it without setting her own terms. I have conditions of my own, she said firmly. Alexander's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded for her to continue. First, I want full creative control over the Madame Rossi project. No interference, no matter how tempting you find it. She waited for his nod before continuing. Second, I keep my grandmother's house. I won't move into the mansion's staff quarters anymore. Agreed, he said, surprising her with his quick acceptance. Anything else? Isabella met his gaze steadily. Yes, from now on, we work as equals. No more games, no more tests. If this is going to work, we need to trust each other. For a long moment, Alexander just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly he held out his hand. Partners, then. Isabella looked at his offered hand, remembering all the times she had watched him seal deals in this very office. This wasn't just a job offer, it was a turning point. Whatever she chose next would change everything. She took his hand, her grip firm and confident. Partners. His fingers tightened around hers, and that electricity crackled between them again. Neither of them moved to break the handshake, both aware that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. Finally, Alexander released her hand and stepped back. Take the rest of the day to move your things from the staff quarters. Your new office will be ready tomorrow morning. Isabella nodded and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her at the door. Isabella? She looked back at him. That dress last night, you were beautiful in it. A warm flush crept up her neck, but she kept her voice steady. Thank you, Alexander. It was the first time she had used his first name. From the way his eyes darkened, she knew he had noticed. Without another word, she left the office, her heart pounding with the knowledge that her life would never be the same again. Isabella's new office was located on the top floor of the Blackwood Industries building, just down the hall from Alexander's. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, while sleek modern furniture, in shades of cream and silver, created an atmosphere of sophisticated elegance. It was worlds away from the servants' quarters she had occupied, just yesterday. She spent her first morning familiarizing herself with her new responsibilities, reviewing upcoming meetings and ongoing projects. Alexander had left a stack of files on her desk, each one detailing a different aspect of the business she would need to understand. The complexity was daunting, but Isabella had always been a quick learner. A soft knock at her door interrupted her concentration. "Come in," she called, looking up to find Alexander's previous assistant, Margaret, standing in the doorway. "Mr. Blackwood asked me to brief you on some of our ongoing projects," Margaret said, her tone professional, but her eyes curious. Isabella. Couldn't blame her. It wasn't every day that a housekeeper became an executive assistant. "Please sit," Isabella gestured to one of the leather chairs facing her desk. "I'd appreciate any insights you can share." For the next hour, Margaret walked her through the intricacies of Alexander's schedule, his preferences for how reports should be formatted, and the complex web of relationships she would need to navigate. Isabella took careful notes, asking questions that made Margaret's eyebrows rise with surprise at their insight. "You already understand a lot of this," Margaret observed. Isabella smiled slightly. 5 years of serving coffee in business meetings teaches you more than people realize. Well, you'll need all that knowledge for your first real challenge. Margaret handed her a final folder. "The Chen merger. Mr. Blackwood wants you to take point on the social aspects of the deal." Isabella opened the folder, scanning its contents. The merger with Chen Global Industries would be the biggest deal of the year if it went through. James Chen was known for being as interested in personal connections as business metrics. "The Chens are hosting a weekend at their lake house next month," Margaret continued. "Key executives and their families. Very exclusive, very informal. Mr. Blackwood usually declines these kinds of invitations. But this time he needs to attend," Isabella finished, "and he needs me to make sure it goes smoothly." "Exactly. Good luck with that. Mr. Blackwood hasn't taken a weekend off in the 5 years I've worked here." After Margaret left, Isabella sat back in her chair, thinking. She knew Alexander's aversion to social events that couldn't be strictly controlled. But she also knew that this merger could transform both companies. Somehow she needed to convince him to step out of his comfort zone. She was still pondering this challenge when her office phone buzzed. "Isabella, my office," Alexander's voice came through the speaker. "Bring the Chen file." She found him at his desk, surrounded by spreadsheets and market analyses. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment something flickered in his eyes. Approval, perhaps, at how naturally she fit into this new role. "What do you think about the lake house invitation?" he asked without preamble. "I think we need to accept," she replied, taking a seat across from him. "The Chens value personal relationships. Declining would send the wrong message." Alexander's jaw tightened. "I don't do weekend retreats." "You do if you want this merger." Isabella leaned forward, her voice firm. "James Chen needs to know he can trust you, not just your business acumen. This is an opportunity to show him the real Alexander Blackwood." "And who exactly is that?" he asked, his tone challenging. Isabella met his gaze steadily. "That's what I'm still trying to figure out." The tension in the room shifted, becoming something else entirely. Alexander stood up, moving to the window. "And what about the Madame Rossi project? How's that progressing?" "I'm meeting with her this afternoon," Isabella said, allowing the change of subject. "Several of the contacts from the reception have expressed interest in exclusive pieces. Victoria Sterling, in particular, seems eager to commission something." He turned back to face her. "Victoria Sterling, who tried to humiliate you at the reception?" "The same," Isabella smiled. "Sometimes the best revenge is success." A small laugh escaped him, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face. Isabella found herself staring, caught off guard by how the humor softened his features, made him look younger, more approachable. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" he said softly. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. "Mr. Blackwood, your 11 o'clock is here," his secretary announced. The moment broken, Alexander straightened his tie. "Work on the Chen weekend. Find a way to make it bearable." "And Isabella," he added as she reached the door, "wear something blue to the board meeting this afternoon. It's Henderson's favorite color, and we need his vote on the Asian expansion." She nodded, hiding her smile. Some things hadn't changed. He was still calculating, still manipulating every situation to his advantage. But now she was part of the strategy, not just the backdrop. Back in her office, Isabella pulled out her phone and dialed a familiar number. Madame Rossi, it's Isabella Martinez. I think it's time we discussed that business proposition I mentioned. How soon can you meet? As she hung up, her eye caught the gleam of the city through her window. Somewhere out there, her grandmother's old workroom still existed, gathering dust. But not for much longer. Soon it would shine again, just like its heir. The game was changing, and this time Isabella wasn't just a player. She was helping to write the rules. Madame Rossi's atelier looked different in the afternoon light, the sunbeams catching dust motes that danced through the air like golden threads. Isabella sat in one of the vintage armchairs, watching the elderly seamstress examine the business proposal she had just presented. A full revival of the business? Madame Rossi asked, looking up from the papers. With Blackwood Industries? Backing? Full creative control would remain with you, Isabella assured her. Alexander, Mr. Blackwood, is who understands the value of artistic integrity. He's offering capital, marketing support, and business infrastructure. Nothing more. The older woman's eyes twinkled. And what does he get in return? A percentage of the profits, of course, but more importantly, exclusive access to a legendary fashion house that's about to make a spectacular comeback. Isabella leaned forward. The timing is perfect. There's a growing movement away from fast fashion, a return to appreciation for craftsmanship and heritage. Your techniques, your knowledge. They're more valuable now than ever. Madame Rossi set the proposal aside, studying Isabella with shrewd eyes. And what do you get out of this, my dear? The question caught Isabella off guard. I get to honor my grandmother's legacy, to help preserve the art she loved. And to prove something to a certain Mr. Blackwood. Perhaps? A flush crept up Isabella's neck. That's not... Oh, please. Madame Rossi waved her hand dismissively. I'm old, not blind. I saw how you transformed that dress he sent you. That wasn't just about fashion. It was a statement. Before Isabella could respond, the bell above the shop door chimed. Victoria Sterling swept in, wearing an outfit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Madame Rossi, Victoria called out, then stopped short at the sight of Isabella. Oh, I didn't realize you'd be here. Isabella rose smoothly. Mrs. Sterling, what a pleasant surprise. I was just discussing some exciting new developments with Madame Rossi. Perhaps you'd like to hear about them. Victoria's perfectly manicured eyebrows drew together in confusion, but her social training kicked in. Of course. For the next hour, Isabella outlined their vision for the revived fashion house, watching as Victoria's initial skepticism transformed into genuine interest. By the time they finished, Victoria had not only commissioned 3 pieces, but also offered to host a launch event at her penthouse. Your grandmother would be proud, Madame Rossi said, after Victoria left. You have her eye for opportunity, but your own gift for strategy. She picked up the proposal again. I accept with one condition. Name it. You must learn the craft, properly this time. No more half-remembered lessons from childhood. If we're going to preserve this art, you need to understand it completely. Isabella felt her heart leap. You'll teach me? Every morning, 6 to 8, before your duties at Blackwood Industries. Madame Rossi's tone brooked no argument. We start tomorrow. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and phone calls. By the time Isabella returned to Blackwood Industries, the afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the city. She found Alexander still in his office, his jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up as he pored over documents. How did it go? He asked without looking up. Madame Rossi accepted. Victoria Sterling will host the launch event, and we already have 3 commissions. Isabella perched on the edge of his desk, something she never would have dared do a week ago. But there's one small adjustment to the schedule we need to discuss. Now he did look up, his eyes catching on her casual position on his desk. Oh? I'll be arriving at 9 instead of 8 each morning. I'm apprenticing with Madame Rossi. Alexander sat back in his chair, studying her. You're already working. More than full-time here, why take that on? Because some things are worth the extra effort. She met his gaze steadily. You taught me that." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, followed by something warmer. "Did I? 5 years of watching you work until midnight, triple-checking every detail, yes, you did." He stood up slowly, coming to lean against the desk beside her. Their shoulders were almost touching, and Isabella could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You really did watch everything, didn't you?" His voice was low, intimate in the quiet office. "I saw more than you realized," she admitted, "just like you saw more in me than I thought." The air between them crackled with unspoken possibilities. Alexander turned slightly, his hand coming to rest on the desk just inches from hers. "Isabella." His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. Isabella stood quickly, smoothing her skirt. "I should go early morning tomorrow." "Wait." Alexander caught her wrist just as he had after the reception. "The Chen weekend. Have dinner with me tomorrow night and we'll discuss the details." Wasn't quite a request, but it wasn't quite a command either. Isabella felt her pulse jump under his fingers. "Dinner?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Or a business meeting?" His lips curved into a small smile. "Why don't we find out?" Isabella gently pulled her wrist free, but she was smiling too. 7 o'clock then. You choose the place." As she walked to her car in the growing dusk, Isabella thought about how much had changed in just a few days. She had gone from being invisible to being seen, truly seen, not just by Alexander, but by everyone. More importantly, she was finally seeing herself clearly, understanding her own power and potential. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: morning lessons with Madame Rossi, a full day of work, and dinner with Alexander that might, or might not, be a date. But for now, she savored the feeling of everything falling into place, one carefully orchestrated piece at a time. The restaurant Alexander chose for their dinner was tucked away on the top floor of one of the city's oldest buildings. Le Ciel was known for its breathtaking views, exceptional cuisine, and absolute privacy. A place where the city's elite could dine without fear of prying eyes or unwanted interruptions. Isabella arrived exactly on time, stepping out of her car into the cool evening air. Her dress for the evening was a deep burgundy silk that Madame Rossi had helped her select from the atelier's private collection. Simple but elegant, with subtle details that only a trained eye would notice. The maître d' led her through the dimly lit restaurant to a secluded corner table where Alexander was already waiting. He stood as she approached, and something flickered in his eyes as he took in her appearance. "That's not from your usual wardrobe," he observed, pulling out her chair. Isabella smiled as she sat. "Madame Rossi's influence is already showing, I suppose." "It suits you." He resumed his seat, and a waiter immediately appeared with 2 glasses of champagne. "To new partnerships." They clinked glasses, and Isabella took a small sip, watching him over the rim. "Is that what this is? A business dinner to discuss partnerships?" Alexander set his glass down, studying her with that intense gaze that always made her feel as though he could see right through her carefully constructed composure. "Would you prefer it to be something else?" Before she could respond, the waiter returned to take their orders. Alexander ordered for both of them in perfect French, a skill Isabella hadn't known he possessed. There was still so much to learn about him, she realized, so many layers beneath that controlled exterior. "Tell me about your first day of apprenticeship," he said, once they were alone again. Isabella flexed her fingers, remembering the morning's lessons. "Madame Rossi believes in starting with the basics. We spent 2 hours on different types of hand stitches. My fingers may never recover." "And yet you're smiling." "Because it feels right," she admitted, "like I'm finally doing what I was meant to do, even if it's not quite how I imagined it." "What did you imagine?" The question was soft, genuine, curiosity in his tone. Isabella took another sip of champagne, considering her answer. "When I was young, I thought I'd inherit my grandmother's small workshop, continue her tradition of making beautiful things for people who appreciated craftsmanship. So I never imagined," she gestured to their surroundings, "all of this." "Do you regret accepting my offer?" "No." The answer came quickly, surprising them both with its certainty. "This is better, bigger. We're not just preserving the art, we're giving it a future." Their first course arrived, delicate seafood appetizers arranged like works of art on pristine white plates. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment before Alexander spoke again. "I've been thinking about the Chen weekend," he said, transitioning smoothly to business. "You're right. We need to accept. But I have conditions." Isabella nodded, having expected this. "Let me guess. No team-building exercises, no group activities, and you want to maintain control of your schedule." A slight smile tugged at his lips. "You really did pay attention all these years." "It's my job to understand you, Alexander, both then and now." Something shifted in his expression at her use of his first name. "And do you understand me?" Isabella met his gaze steadily. "I'm beginning to." The tension between them crackled, electric and undeniable. Alexander leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "What do you see when you look at me, Isabella?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "A man who built an empire through control and calculation, who plans every move 10 steps ahead, who never shows weakness or uncertainty." She took a breath. "But I also see someone who took a chance on a housekeeper, who recognized potential where others saw only service. Someone who might be tired of always being 10 steps ahead." Alexander sat back, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Isabella feared she had overstepped. Then he reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Come with me to the Chen weekend," he said softly. "I was already planning to. It's my job to—" "No." His grip tightened slightly. "Not as my assistant. As my date." Isabella's heart skipped a beat. "Alexander, we can maintain professional boundaries at work," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "But I think we both know this is more than just business." The waiter approached with their main course, and Alexander released her hand. Isabella used the interruption to gather her thoughts, to calm her racing pulse. When they were alone again, she looked at him seriously. "If we do this, if we cross this line, everything changes. The board, the employees, the media, they'll all have opinions, assumptions. Let them talk." His voice was firm. "I've spent my life making decisions based on business strategy and public perception. For once, I want to do something simply because I want to." "And what exactly do you want?" Alexander's eyes darkened. "To see where this leads, to discover who you really are beyond the roles we've both been playing, to find out if what I feel when I'm with you is real or just the thrill of discovering I was wrong about something. For once in my life." Isabella felt her breath catch. This was dangerous territory, far more dangerous than business deals or social maneuvering. This was real, raw, unexpected. "One condition," she said finally. "Name it. We take it slow. Figure out what this is before we let it affect everything we're building." Alexander nodded, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Agreed." He raised his glass again. "To new beginnings?" Isabella clinked her glass against his, feeling as though she was standing on the edge of something vast and unknown. "To new beginnings." The rest of dinner passed in a blur of excellent food and even better conversation. They discussed the Chen weekend, yes, but also art, music, their childhoods, their dreams. With each passing moment, Isabella felt the walls between them crumbling, revealing the people beneath their carefully constructed personas. As they stood waiting for their cars later that night, Alexander turned to her. "Thank you for tonight." "For dinner? Or for agreeing to go to the lake?" "House? For seeing me," he said simply. "For really seeing me." Before she could respond, he leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to her cheek. The touch was brief, gentle, but it sent electricity coursing through her entire body. "Good night, Isabella," he murmured, then turned and walked to his waiting car. Isabella touched her cheek where his lips had been, watching his car disappear into the night. Something had shifted tonight, something fundamental and irreversible, and she couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. The pre-dawn hours found Isabella in Madame Rossi's atelier, surrounded by swatches of silk and lengths of delicate. Her fingers moved carefully over the fabric, practicing the intricate stitches she had learned the day before. Despite her lack of sleep after the late dinner with Alexander, she felt more alive than she had in years. "Your tension is off," Madame Rossi observed, appearing silently at her shoulder. "You're distracted this morning." Isabella smoothed the fabric, trying to focus. "I'm sorry, I had a complicated evening." "Ah." The older woman's knowing smile said she understood perfectly. "Mr. Blackwood is not a simple man." "Nothing about this situation is simple." Isabella set down her work, flexing her tired fingers. "The business world already questions my sudden promotion. If they knew about dinner last night, they would gossip, yes, make assumptions, perhaps even try to undermine you." Madame Rossi pulled up a chair, her eyes sharp and clear in the early morning light. "But let me ask you something, my dear. When you restored that dress for the reception, did you care what people might think? That was different. Was it? You took a challenge meant to humiliate you and turned it into an opportunity. Why should this be any different?" Before Isabella could respond, the atelier's door chimed. Victoria Sterling swept in, immaculately, dressed despite the early hour. "I hope I'm not interrupting," Victoria said, though her tone suggested she didn't particularly care if she was. "I wanted to discuss the designs for my commission before my breakfast meeting." Isabella moved to excuse herself, but Madame Rossi's hand on her arm stopped her. "Stay. You should learn how to handle these consultations." What followed was a masterclass in client management. Victoria had arrived with a magazine full of designer dresses she wanted to emulate, but Madame Rossi slowly, expertly guided her towards something uniquely suited to her style and personality. "The key, Madame," Rossi explained after Victoria left, "is to understand what they really want, not just what they think they want. It's like your Mr. Blackwood. He thinks he wants control, but what he really wants is someone who understands him well enough to help him let go of it sometimes." Isabella felt her cheeks warm. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who has spent decades observing people." The older woman patted her hand. "Now show me that French seam again, and this time focus on your work, not your heart." The morning lesson flew by, and soon Isabella was rushing to change for her day at Blackwood Industries. She had just settled into her office when her phone buzzed with a message from Alexander. "My office now." The curtness of the message sent a flutter of anxiety through her stomach. Had he regretted last night? Was he about to establish professional boundaries she wasn't sure she wanted? But when she entered his office, she found him looking more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. His jacket was already off, sleeves rolled up, and there was an energy about him that made him seem younger, less controlled. "I've been thinking about the Chen weekend," he said without preamble. "You're right about making it more personal, less business. So I made some calls." He handed her a folder. Inside were photos of a beautiful lakeside property, smaller and more intimate than the Chen estate. "It's my family's summer house," Alexander explained. "I haven't used it in years, but it's still maintained. I thought we could arrive a day early, get settled before the others arrive. Maybe—" He hesitated, showing a rare moment of uncertainty. "Maybe you could help me remember how to relax." The implications of his suggestion hung in the air between them. A day alone together, away from the office, away from the city's watching eyes. "Alexander," she began, but he cut her off. "I know what we agreed about taking it slow. This isn't— I'm not pushing for anything. I just thought it might be nice to have some time to figure out who we are together, outside of all this." He gestured to the office around them. Isabella studied him, noting the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers tapped restlessly on his desk. He was nervous, she realized. The great Alexander Blackwood, who could negotiate million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, was nervous about asking her to spend time with him. "Okay," she said softly. His head snapped up. "Okay?" "Yes, but I have one condition." "Another one?" But he was smiling now, relief evident in his expression. "You have to let me teach you something about fashion design. If we're going to make this partnership work, both personal and professional, you should understand what we're building with Madame Rossi." Alexander's smile widened. Deal. He stood, coming around his desk to stand in front of her. Speaking of deals, the Chen merger documents arrived this morning. Would you like to review them over lunch? Is this a business lunch or a personal one? She asked, echoing their conversation from the night before. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was intimate, tender, in a way she hadn't expected from him. Let's find out. A knock at the door had them stepping apart quickly. Margaret entered with a stack of papers, her eyes darting between them with poorly concealed curiosity. The board meeting has been moved up to 11, she announced, and Mr. Chen's office called. They want to discuss some changes to the merger. Terms. Just like that, they were back in business mode. But something had changed. There was an undercurrent of awareness now, a shared secret that made every interaction feel charged with possibility. As Isabella returned to her office to prepare for the board meeting, she thought about what Madame Rossi had said. Nothing about this situation was simple, but maybe it didn't need to be. Maybe, like the intricate stitches she was learning to master, the complexity was what made it beautiful. She just hoped they were both ready for whatever pattern they were about to create together. The week before the Chen weekend passed in a whirlwind of activity. Isabella's days began before dawn with Madame Rossi, her fingers growing more confident with each morning's lessons. The afternoons were filled with meetings and preparations for both the merger and the fashion house launch, while her evenings often stretched late into the night as she and Alexander worked side by side in their adjoining offices. They had maintained a careful professional distance at work, but there were moments, a lingering touch when passing documents, shared glances during meetings, quiet dinners in his office when everyone else had gone home. That made Isabella's heart race. The anticipation of their upcoming weekend together hummed beneath every interaction. "You're getting better," Madame Rossi observed one morning, examining Isabella's work on a complicated embroidery pattern. "Your grandmother had the same determination in her eyes when she was learning." "I wish she could see this," Isabella said softly, running her fingers over the delicate stitches. "Everything that's happening, the revival of her techniques, the launch event." "She sees." The older woman squeezed her shoulder. "Now tell me about this weekend trip you're preparing for. I assume you'll need something special to wear." Isabella looked up, surprised. "How did you—" "My dear, the whole city is buzzing about the Chen merger weekend, and about you and Mr. Blackwood arriving early to prepare the arrangements." Her eyes twinkled. "People talk, especially in our circles." "It's not as we're just testing the waters," Madame Rossi supplied. "Finding your footing in this new dynamic?" "Yes, I can see that, which is exactly why you need the right armor." She disappeared into the back room and returned with a garment bag. "I've been working on this between lessons. Consider it a gift from a proud teacher." Inside the bag was a dress that took Isabella's breath away. The silk was a deep azure that seemed to shift colors as it moved, with delicate hand beading that caught the light like stars on water. It was elegant without being flashy, sophisticated but not severe. "It's perfect for a lakeside weekend," Madame Rossi said, smoothing the fabric, "especially one where you need to balance multiple roles: business partner, potential romantic, interest and fashion house heir." Isabella touched the dress reverently. "I can't accept this, it's too much." "Nonsense. Consider it an investment in our future success." The older woman's expression grew serious. "But remember what I taught you about fabric and strength. The finest silk can still tear if pulled too quickly in too many directions. Take care with your heart, my dear." Before Isabella could respond, her phone chimed with a message from Alexander. "Emergency board meeting, need you here." She arrived at the office 20 minutes later to find the atmosphere tense. Victoria Sterling's husband, Thomas, was pacing the conference room, his face thunderous. Alexander stood at the window, his posture rigid. "What's going on?" Isabella asked Margaret in a low voice. "Sterling Industries is threatening to pull their support for the Chen merger," Margaret whispered back. "Something about competing interests in the Asian market." Isabella's mind raced. The Sterlings were major shareholders, and their support was crucial. But she had seen Victoria just that morning, discussing fabric choices and social events. Maybe? She pulled out her phone and sent a quick text. Within minutes, Victoria Sterling swept into the conference room. "Thomas, darling," she called out sweetly, "I just had the most interesting conversation with Madame Rossi about your mother's upcoming birthday celebration. Did you know she still has the patterns from your grandmother's favorite designer?" Thomas Sterling stopped pacing. "What?" Yes. Apparently she worked with them quite closely in the 50s. I was thinking, as part of our new partnership with the atelier, we might commission something special. A recreation of one of your grandmother's signature pieces, perhaps." The tension in the room shifted subtly. Thomas Sterling's mother was notoriously sentimental about family history, and her approval still carried significant weight in their social circle. "Of course," Isabella added smoothly, "such an exclusive piece would need to be handled with the utmost discretion. We couldn't possibly proceed if there were any conflicts between our companies." She felt Alexander's eyes on her, but kept her attention focused on the Sterlings. Victoria was smiling, that cat-like smile that meant she understood the game perfectly. "Thomas," she said to her husband, "surely we can find a way to make this work. For Mother's sake." 2 hours later, the crisis had been averted. Thomas Sterling had found a compromise that would allow both companies to maintain their interests while supporting the Chen merger. As the board members filed out, Alexander caught Isabella's arm. "That was brilliant," he said softly. "How did you know?" "Victoria mentioned her mother-in-law's birthday over coffee last week. I just connected the dots." She smiled. "Sometimes the personal touch matters more than business strategy." His hand slid down her arm to intertwine their fingers. "Speaking of personal touches, I had a call from the caretaker at the lake house. Everything's ready for Friday." Isabella felt her pulse quicken. "Alexander, I know, professional distance at work." But he didn't let go of her hand. "Have dinner with me tonight? We should discuss the weekend schedule." "Just the schedule?" she teased. His eyes darkened. "Among other things." The moment was interrupted by Margaret clearing her throat. "Mr. Chen's office is on line 1, she announced, pointedly not looking at their joined hands. Alexander squeezed, her fingers once before letting go. "Tonight, 8 o'clock." Isabella nodded, already missing the warmth of his touch. As she walked back to her office, she thought about Madame Rossi's warning about silk and strength. She was indeed being pulled in multiple directions: business, fashion, romance. But somehow it all felt right, like different threads being woven into a perfect pattern. She just hoped the pattern would hold when tested by the pressures of the weekend ahead. Friday morning dawned clear and bright, with the promise of early summer. Warmth in the air. Isabella had packed and repacked her bag a dozen times, including the beautiful blue dress from Madame Rossi. Her morning lesson had been brief. The older woman had shooed her away with a knowing smile and a reminder to let the pattern develop naturally. Alexander was waiting by his car when she arrived at their agreed-upon meeting spot, a small cafe away from the prying eyes of the office. He looked different in casual clothes, dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt that made his eyes seem softer somehow, more human, less the untouchable CEO. "You look..." He paused, taking in her sundress and loose hair. "Different. Beautiful." "You clean up pretty well yourself," she teased, trying to hide how his compliment made her pulse race. "Though I'm having trouble reconciling this version of you with the man who once spent 3 hours debating the font choice for our annual report." He laughed, a genuine sound that she was hearing more often lately. "That font decision was crucial to our brand identity, I'll have you know." He opened the passenger door for her. "Ready?" The drive to the lake house took them through increasingly scenic countryside. Isabella watched as the city's glass towers gave way to rolling hills and eventually thick forests. Alexander drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting, casually on the center console, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin, but not quite touching. "Tell me about the house," she said, breaking a comfortable silence. "You mentioned it's been in your family." His expression softened with memory. My grandfather built it in the 60s. We used to spend every summer there when I was young. After they separated, the visits became less frequent. Eventually, they stopped altogether. Isabella heard the undertone of old pain in his voice. But you kept it. I couldn't bring myself to sell it. It represented something simpler, more genuine than the world I built for myself. He glanced at her. You're actually the first person I've brought here since I took over the company. The weight of that admission hung between them. Isabella reached over and covered his hand with hers. He immediately turned his palm up, interlacing their fingers. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, hands joined, each lost in their own thoughts about what this weekend might mean. When they finally turned onto a private drive, bordered by ancient oaks, Isabella gasped. The lake house was nothing like she had imagined. Instead of the ostentatious mansion she had expected, it was a graceful wooden structure that seemed to grow naturally from the landscape. Wide windows and wraparound porches offered views of the sparkling lake below, while mature gardens softened the transition between architecture and nature. Alexander, it's beautiful. He parked in front of the house, but didn't immediately move to get out. Instead, he turned to face her, his expression serious. Isabella, before we go in, I want you to know something. Her heart skipped. What is it? This weekend, yes, it's about the Chen merger, and yes, we need to maintain professional appearances when the others arrive. But these next 24 hours, he reached up to cup her cheek. They're just for us, no business, no strategies, no roles to play, just us figuring out what this is between us. Isabella leaned into his touch. What do you think it is? I think... He traced his thumb along her jawline. It's the most real thing I've felt in years. The air between them crackled with tension. Isabella found herself leaning forward, drawn by the intensity in his eyes. Alexander's gaze dropped to her lips, and for a moment she thought he would kiss her. Instead, he pulled back slightly, a small smile playing at his lips. Let's get settled first. We have time. The interior of the house was just as charming as the exterior, all warm woods and comfortable furniture, with none of the stark modernity of Alexander's city home. Isabella wandered through the rooms while he brought in their bags, trailing her fingers along well-worn banisters and admiring family photos that showed a younger, carefree version of the man she was coming to know. The view from the back porch is the best, Alexander said, appearing behind her. Especially at sunset. They stepped out onto the porch together, and Isabella caught her breath. The lake stretched out before them, its surface painted with the colors of late afternoon sun. A gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and water, along with the distant calls of birds. I can see why you kept this place, she said softly. It feels like a different world. It is. He moved closer, his hand finding the small of her back. A world where I don't have to be Alexander Blackwood, CEO, where business deals and social expectations don't matter. Isabella turned to face him. And who are you in this world? His other hand came up to cradle her face. Why don't you help me find out? This time, when he leaned in, there was no interruption. His lips met hers softly, tentatively, as if he was asking a question. Isabella answered by stepping closer, her hands sliding up his chest to curl around his shoulders. The kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent, more real. All the tension that had been building between them over the past weeks poured into this moment. Alexander's arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer until she could feel his heartbeat against her chest. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, the sun was setting over the lake, painting everything in shades of gold and rose. Alexander rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. I've wanted to do that since the night of the reception, he admitted. Isabella smiled, her fingers playing with the hair at the nape of his neck. That long? Longer, probably. I just didn't let myself acknowledge it until I saw you in that transformed dress, holding your own against Victoria Sterling. And now? He opened his eyes, and the intensity of his gaze made her shiver. Now I'm acknowledging everything. Whatever this is, wherever it leads, I'm all in. The sun dipped below the horizon, its last rays turning the lake to liquid fire. Standing there in Alexander's arms, watching the day fade into evening, Isabella felt something settle in her heart. This wasn't just about business or social climbing or proving herself anymore. This was about two people who had been hiding behind carefully constructed facades, finally allowing themselves to be real. And whatever challenges lay ahead, the Chen merger, the fashion house launch, the inevitable gossip and speculation, they would face them together. "All in," she echoed, and pulled him down for another kiss as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The next morning brought a shift in the peaceful atmosphere of the lake house. Isabella woke early, the sunrise painting her room in soft pastels. She and Alexander had spent the previous evening talking for hours on the porch, sharing stories and dreams, punctuated by tender kisses and meaningful silences. It had felt like existing in a beautiful bubble, separate from the real world. But reality was arriving today, in the form of James Chen and the other executives. She found Alexander in the kitchen, already dressed in casual but expensive resort wear, making coffee. He looked up when she entered, his face breaking into a warm smile that made her heart skip. "Good morning," he said, holding out a cup made exactly how she liked it, a detail he must have noticed during their years working together. "Morning." She accepted the coffee, letting her fingers brush against his. "Ready for today?" His free hand settled on her waist, pulling her closer. "5 more minutes of just us?" Isabella melted into his embrace, breathing in his familiar cologne mixed with the scent of coffee and morning air. They stood like that for a moment, savoring the last bit of privacy before their world expanded to include others. The sound of car tires on gravel broke the spell. "They're early," Alexander muttered, reluctantly releasing her. But before he stepped away, he pressed a quick kiss to her forehead. "Remember, no matter what happens this weekend, last night was real." Isabella smoothed her sundress and took a fortifying sip of coffee. Showtime. The first to arrive were the Chens, James and his wife Sarah, along with their daughter Michelle. They swept into the house with the easy confidence of people accustomed to being welcomed everywhere. "Alexander," James called out warmly, "this place is magnificent. And Isabella, you look radiant this morning." Sarah Chen's sharp eyes missed nothing, taking in the 2 coffee cups on the counter and the subtle way Alexander and Isabella stood just slightly closer than strictly professional. But she just smiled, linking her arm through Isabella's. "You must show me around," she said. "I want to hear all about the progress with Madame Rossi's atelier. The fashion world is buzzing about the revival." As Isabella led Sarah on a tour of the house, she could hear more cars arriving. The Sterlings, the Thompsons, and several other key players in the merger. Each arrival shifted the dynamic slightly, adding new layers of complexity to the delicate balance they were all maintaining. By mid-morning, the lake house was full of activity. Groups gathered on the various porches and terraces, ostensibly relaxing but really engaging in the delicate dance of high-stakes business relationships. Isabella watched Alexander move among them, somehow managing to seem both relaxed and in complete control. "He's different with you," a voice said beside her. Michelle, Chen, James's daughter, had appeared with 2 glasses of iced tea, offering one to Isabella. "I'm sorry? Alexander? I've known him for years. Our families have done business forever. I've never seen him like this." Michelle sipped her tea thoughtfully. "He actually seems happy." Before Isabella could respond, Victoria Sterling's voice carried across the terrace. "Oh, Isabella, darling, you simply must tell everyone about the plans for Mother's birthday gown. It's going to be such a special piece." Isabella recognized the strategic opening. Victoria was giving her a chance to showcase the fashion house project to the entire group. She moved to join the conversation, but not before catching Alexander's proud smile from across the terrace. The afternoon progressed smoothly, with business discussions woven naturally into social interactions. Isabella found herself at the center of many conversations, equally comfortable discussing merger details with James Chen and fashion trends with Sarah. "You're a natural at this," Alexander murmured during a brief moment alone as they prepared drinks for the group. "They all adore you." "I learned from watching you," she replied softly, "though I think I prefer our quiet dinner from last night." His hand brushed against hers as he reached for a glass. "Tonight, after everyone retires, meet me on the back porch." The promise in his voice made her shiver. "Yes." The moment was interrupted by Thomas Sterling approaching with questions about the Asian market strategy. Isabella stepped away to give them privacy, finding herself drawn into a conversation with Sarah Chen about the possibility of commissioning wedding gowns from the revived atelier. "Not just any wedding gowns," Sarah said meaningfully, glancing at where Michelle sat, chatting with one of the younger executives. "My daughter has very specific taste. We'd need someone who understands both tradition and innovation." The implications were clear. A Chen family wedding gown would be a massive coup for the new fashion house. But more than that, Sarah was offering Isabella entry into their social circle, acceptance at the highest levels. As the sun began to set, the group moved inside for dinner. Alexander had arranged for a local chef to prepare a feast that perfectly balanced sophistication with casual comfort. Isabella found herself seated between James Chen and Richard Thompson, engaged in a fascinating discussion about the intersection of fashion and technology. "The potential for innovation in textiles is enormous," Richard was saying. "If your fashion house could be at the forefront of that." "Actually," Isabella replied, "Madame Rossi and I have been discussing some interesting possibilities for incorporating smart fabrics into traditional couture techniques." She caught Alexander watching her from the head of the table, his eyes warm with pride and something deeper. In that moment, despite the crowd around them, it felt like they were the only two people in the room. The evening wound down naturally, with couples and groups drifting off to their assigned rooms. Isabella lingered in the living room, helping to tidy up despite the staff Alexander had hired for the weekend. "Leave it," he said softly, coming up behind her. "Remember our appointment." The back porch was bathed in moonlight when they stepped out. The lake was a mirror of silver, reflecting the stars above. Alexander pulled her into his arms without hesitation, as if he'd been waiting all day for this moment. "You were amazing today," he murmured into her hair. "So were you." She looked up at him. "Is it always going to be like this?" "Balancing what?" "We are in private with who we need to be in public." "Not forever." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "Just until the merger is complete, the fashion house is launched, until we're ready to face the world's opinions about us." "And when will that be?" Instead of answering, he kissed her. Unlike their first kisses the night before, this one held certainty, promise, and a depth of feeling that took her breath away. When they finally parted, Isabella could see their future stretching out before them like the starlit lake, full of possibility and beauty. Little did they know that tomorrow would test everything they thought they knew about each other, about trust, and about the fine line between personal and professional relationships. Sunday morning brought unexpected challenges. Isabella woke to the sound of urgent voices coming from Alexander's study. Pulling on a light robe over her pajamas, she made her way downstairs to find Alexander in an intense discussion with James Chen and Thomas Sterling. "The numbers from Asia don't add up," Thomas was saying, his face flushed with agitation. "Someone's been manipulating the projections." Alexander looked up as Isabella entered, his expression tight with concern. "The merger agreement may be compromised," he explained quietly. "We've found discrepancies in the financial reports." Isabella's mind raced. All their careful planning, the delicate balance they'd achieved this weekend, it could all unravel in an instant. But more importantly, she could see the strain in Alexander's shoulders, the way he was retreating behind his CEO facade. "Perhaps we should discuss this over breakfast," she suggested smoothly. Sarah mentioned wanting to try that local bakery's pastries, and I'm sure everyone would think more clearly with coffee and food. James Chen's expression lightened slightly. An excellent suggestion. Thomas, let's reconvene in an hour. Give our teams time to review the numbers more thoroughly. As the men filed out, Alexander remained behind, running a hand through his hair in frustration. This could ruin everything we've worked for. Isabella closed the study door and moved to stand behind him, her hands gently massaging his tense shoulders. Tell me what you need. He leaned back into her touch. I need to fix this. The merger, the relationships we've built. I can't let it fall apart. We won't, she assured him. But first you need to step back and breathe. Remember what you told me about this place, about being able to be yourself here. He turned to face her, his expression softening. How do you do that? Do what? Know exactly what I need to hear. His hands settled on her waist. I've spent years building walls, maintaining control, and somehow you just walk right through them. Isabella smiled, straightening his collar. Maybe that's why we work. Now go get cleaned up for breakfast. I'll handle the arrangements. The next hour was a whirlwind of activity. Isabella coordinated with the staff to set up an elegant breakfast on the main terrace, complete with fresh flowers and the promised pastries. She made sure everyone's coffee preferences were perfectly met and arranged the seating to facilitate both casual conversation and serious discussion. When Alexander emerged from upstairs, dressed impeccably but looking more relaxed, he found a scene of perfect harmony. Sarah Chen was teaching Michelle how to properly steep loose-leaf tea, while Victoria Sterling and Richard Thompson's wife discussed the upcoming fashion house launch. The business tension had been temporarily diffused by social grace. Impressive, he murmured, coming to stand beside Isabella. Though I shouldn't be surprised anymore by your ability to handle crisis. Not handling, she corrected, transforming, like turning a damaged dress into something beautiful. His eyes sparkled with understanding. Speaking of transformation, I had an idea about the merger situation. They spent the next few minutes in quiet discussion, refining his plan. When James Chen and Thomas Sterling returned with their financial teams, Alexander was ready. Gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying across the terrace, I think we've been looking at this all wrong. The discrepancies in the Asian market projections aren't a problem. They're an opportunity. Isabella watched proudly as Alexander laid out a revised strategy that would not only address the financial concerns, but actually strengthen the partnership between the companies. It was brilliant, innovative, and exactly what was needed to save the deal. You see, he concluded, by integrating our fashion house initiative with the Asian expansion, we create a unique market position that benefits everyone. James Chen was nodding thoughtfully. A luxury fashion brand with built-in international distribution and technological innovation. Yes, I can see the potential. The numbers would need to be adjusted, Thomas Sterling added, but his tone was considering rather than confrontational. I've already asked my team to prepare revised projections, Alexander said smoothly. Isabella, would you mind retrieving them from my study? As she stood to leave, Sarah Chen spoke up. Before you go, what would this mean for the wedding gown commission we discussed? Would it be possible to incorporate some of these innovations? Isabella smiled, seeing the perfect opportunity to reinforce the personal connections underlying their business dealings. Actually, I've been discussing some ideas with Madame Rossi that might interest you. Perhaps we could review them together after we handle the financial matters. The rest of the morning unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Business discussions were balanced with social interactions, technical details with personal touches. Isabella moved between groups, offering insights on both the merger and the fashion aspects, while Alexander handled the high-level negotiations. By early afternoon, a new framework for the merger had been established, one that was actually stronger than the original agreement. As the various teams began packing up their materials, Isabella overheard Sarah Chen speaking to her husband. They're quite the pair, aren't they? Business and artistry, strategy and grace, rather like us when we were younger. James Chen's response was thoughtful. Better? Perhaps. They found their balance sooner than we did. Later, as the last cars pulled away from the lake house, Alexander pulled Isabella into his arms. "We did it," he murmured into her hair. "You did it," she corrected. "That strategy was brilliant." "No," he pulled back to look at her. "We did it. Your social orchestration, your ability to keep everyone comfortable while I worked out the details. I couldn't have done this without you. In fact," his voice grew serious, "I'm not sure I want to do any of it without you anymore." Isabella's heart skipped. "Alexander, I know it's fast," he said quickly, "and I know we agreed to take things slow, but this weekend showed me something important. We're better together, not just personally, but in every way. You make me better." She reached up to touch his face, feeling the slight stubble under her fingers. "You make me better too." He turned his head to kiss her palm. "Then stay. Not just for the merger, not just for the fashion house, stay for us." The sun was setting over the lake, painting the world in shades of possibility. Isabella looked at the man before her, no longer the untouchable CEO she had first known, but someone real and vulnerable and extraordinary. "Yes," she said simply, and pulled him down for a kiss that tasted of promise and future and love. But even as they celebrated their personal and professional victories, neither of them could have predicted the challenges that awaited them back in the city. Challenges that would test not just their relationship, but everything they had built together. The return to the city brought an abrupt shift in atmosphere. Gone were the peaceful mornings and starlit evenings of the lake house, replaced by the familiar rhythm of urgent meetings and pressing deadlines. The launch of the revived fashion house was scheduled for the following week, coinciding with the final stages of the Chen merger negotiations. Isabella arrived at Madame Rossi's atelier before dawn, her mind still partially at the lake house. The past week had changed everything, yet here she was threading needles in the quiet morning light as if nothing had happened. "You're distracted again," Madame Rossi observed, but her tone was gentle. "Though this time, your stitches are better. Perhaps happiness steadies the hands." Isabella smiled, examining her work on what would become Victoria Sterling's mother-in-law's birthday gown. "Everything feels different now, like I'm finally exactly where I'm supposed to be. But that's when life likes to test us the most." The older woman sat beside her, adjusting a piece of delicate lace. "Have you seen the society pages this morning?" Isabella's stomach dropped. "No, why?" Madame Rossi wordlessly handed her a tablet. The headline made her breath catch. "Blackwood Industries' Cinderella Story, from Housekeeper to Power Player." Below was a photo of her and Alexander on the lake house terrace, his hand resting intimately on the small of her back as they talked with the Chens. "Someone at the weekend gathering must have leaked it," Isabella said, scanning the article. It wasn't entirely negative. The writer seemed fascinated by the romantic angle, but the implications about her rapid rise in the company were clear. "The question is," Madame Rossi said carefully, "what will you do about it?" Before Isabella could respond, her phone buzzed with a message from Alexander. "My office now." She found him pacing near the windows, the morning paper spread across his desk. He turned when she entered, his expression troubled. "Have you seen it?" "Just now at the atelier." She moved to stand beside him, reading the concern in his face. "Alexander, we knew this would happen eventually. Not like this. Not with the merger still in final negotiations." He ran a hand through his hair. "The board is calling an emergency meeting. They're concerned about the appearance of impropriety." "Do they think I somehow manipulated my way into this position?" The words tasted bitter. "Some of them might." He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "But we know the truth. You earned everything you've achieved. The Chens know it too. James called this morning to reaffirm his support." Isabella squeezed his hand back, then stepped away. "So what do we do?" "We face it head on." His expression turned determined. "The fashion house launch is next week. It's the perfect opportunity to show everyone exactly why you're in this position. No hiding, no apologizing." A knock at the door interrupted them. Margaret entered, looking uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but the Richardson Group is expressing concerns about the merger. They're questioning the stability of the leadership team. Alexander's jaw tightened. Set up a call with their board for this afternoon. And Isabella? He turned to her. I need you to move up the timeline on Victoria Sterling's mother-in-law's gown, if we can showcase that at the launch. I'll talk to Madame Rossi. She straightened her spine, mind already racing with plans. What about the board meeting? Let me handle that. Focus on the launch. Make it impossible for anyone to question your abilities or your place here. Throughout the day, Isabella moved between the atelier and Blackwood Industries, coordinating responses to the growing media interest while ensuring every detail of the launch was perfect. She arrived home late that evening to find a delivery waiting at her door. Inside the package was a familiar blue dress, the one she'd worn at the lake house, along with a note in Alexander's handwriting. Wear this to the board meeting tomorrow. Let them see the woman who caught everyone's attention that weekend. As she smiled, running her fingers over the fabric, Alexander was right. No hiding, no apologizing. She had earned her place in this world, not just through her relationship with him, but through her own skills and determination. Her phone buzzed with another message from Alexander. Dinner. We should discuss strategy for tomorrow. Your place or mine? She texted back. Mine. I have something to show you. An hour later, she found herself in Alexander's penthouse apartment. Unlike his office, this space showed a softer side of him. Art on the walls, comfortable furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. I've been thinking, he said, handing her a glass of wine, about how to handle tomorrow's board meeting. And? He led her to his home office where plans were spread across his desk. Look at these. Isabella leaned in, studying the documents. They were architectural plans for a building, a beautiful modern structure with classic elements. What is this? The future home of Martinez Rossi Couture. He watched her face carefully. A permanent location in the fashion district. State-of-the-art facilities, design studios, exhibition space. Alexander, she traced the plans with trembling fingers. This is incredible. But the timing is perfect. He moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. Tomorrow, I'm not just going to defend our relationship to the board. I'm going to show them our vision. This isn't just about us, it's about building something extraordinary together. Isabella turned in his arms, her eyes shining. You really believe in this, don't you? In me? In us, he corrected, pulling her closer. Everything we touch becomes better when we work together. The merger, the fashion house, even my life. He touched her cheek gently. I love you, Isabella, and I'm not going to let anyone's opinions or assumptions change that. The words hung in the air between them, both terrifying and wonderful in their simplicity. Isabella felt tears prick at her eyes as she realized that this sophisticated, powerful man had just laid his heart bare for her. I love you too, she whispered, and pulled him down for a kiss that tasted of wine and promises and future dreams. Later, as they stood by the windows looking out over the glittering city, Isabella felt a sense of peace settle over her. Tomorrow would bring challenges, the board meeting, the continuing merger negotiations, the preparations for the launch. But here, in this moment, she was exactly where she belonged. She just hoped the rest of the world was ready to accept that truth. The boardroom at Blackwood Industries was a study in power dynamics. 12 members of the board sat around the polished mahogany table, their expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Isabella stood beside Alexander at the head of the table, wearing the blue dress that reminded her of starlit conversations by the lake. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexander began, his voice steady and confident, I've called this meeting to address the recent media speculation about my personal and professional relationship with Isabella Martinez, but more importantly, to show you the future of Blackwood Industries. He launched into a presentation that left Isabella in awe of his strategic thinking. The architectural plans for the new fashion house were just the beginning. He outlined a complete vision of how the merger with Chen Global, combined with the revival of classic couture under the Martinez Rossi brand, would position them at the intersection of tradition and innovation. Ms. Martinez, one of the board members, interrupted. Your rise within this company has been meteoric, some might say suspiciously so. Isabella felt Alexander tense beside her, but she stepped forward. Before he could respond, my position was earned through years of observation and learning, she said clearly. While serving coffee in this very room, I studied every deal, every negotiation. While managing the mansion, I learned the importance of attention to detail and flawless execution. And through my grandmother's legacy, I gained an understanding of both artistic vision and business acumen. She moved to the center of the room, commanding attention just as Alexander had taught her. The Chen merger isn't just succeeding because of traditional business metrics. It's succeeding because we understand how to blend commerce with creativity, numbers with relationships. The fashion house isn't just a side project. It's a demonstration of our ability to recognize and revive valuable traditions while innovating for the future. Victoria Sterling, who sat on the board through her husband's shares, spoke up. I've seen the work being done at the atelier. The combination of Madame Rossi's expertise with modern business practices is remarkable. And profitable, Thomas, Sterling added. The advance orders alone. Another board member leaned forward. But the appearance of impropriety is an appearance only, Alexander cut in, his tone sharp. Isabella's value to this company stands independent of our personal relationship. But since you've raised the issue, yes, I love her. And yes, that love began to develop while she worked in my home. But it grew from watching her intelligence, her grace under pressure, her ability to transform challenges into opportunities. The room fell silent at his declaration. Isabella felt her heart racing, both from his public admission of love and from the weight of the moment. If I may, she said into the silence, I'd like to show you something. She opened her portfolio and began passing around photographs, the restoration work on the dress that had started everything, sketches for the Chen wedding gown commission, plans for incorporating smart fabrics into traditional couture techniques. This is what I bring to Blackwood Industries, she explained. Not just a connection to the fashion world, but an understanding of how to honor tradition while embracing innovation. It's the same principle that makes the Chen merger work, finding the perfect balance between old and new, east and west, creativity and commerce. The board meeting lasted another hour, but Isabella could feel the tide turning. By the time the last questions were answered and the final votes were tallied, they had not only maintained their positions, but gained enthusiastic support for the expansion plans. As the board members filed out, James Chen, who had arrived halfway through the meeting, approached them. Impressive performance, he said, smiling. Both of you, the merger documents will be ready for signing tomorrow. When they were finally alone, Alexander pulled Isabella into his arms. You were magnificent. We both were, she corrected, straightening his tie. But we're not done yet. The fashion house launch will be perfect. He kissed her softly, just like everything else you touch. That evening, Isabella worked late at the atelier, putting the finishing touches on Victoria, Sterling's mother-in-law's gown. Madame Rossi watched her with proud eyes. You found your balance, the older woman observed, between the business world and this one, between your past and your future. Isabella looked up from her work, smiling. I had good teachers. You, my grandmother, Alexander, you all showed me different pieces of who I could be. And now? Madame Rossi raised an eyebrow. Now I know exactly who I am. Isabella ran her hands over the beautiful fabric before her. I'm my grandmother's granddaughter, your apprentice, Alexander's partner, and my own person, all at once. As she left the atelier that night, the city lights seemed to shine brighter than usual. Tomorrow would bring the merger signing, and then the fashion house launch. Challenges would undoubtedly arise, but for the first time in her life, Isabella felt completely ready to face them. Her phone buzzed with a message from Alexander. Late dinner? I've been thinking about the launch event. She smiled, typing back, Your place, I have some ideas too. As her car wound through the city streets, Isabella thought about how far she'd come from the quiet housekeeper she'd once been. But more importantly, she thought about how far she still had to go and how wonderful it was to have someone to share that journey with. The future stretched out before her like a bolt of finest silk, ready to be transformed into something beautiful. And this time, she would be the one doing the transforming. The night of the Martinez Rossi Couture launch arrived on a perfect early summer evening. Victoria Sterling's penthouse had been transformed into an elegant showcase, with mannequins displaying carefully curated pieces that represented both the heritage of traditional couture and its innovative future. Isabella stood in a small side room, making final adjustments to the centerpiece of the evening, the gown for Victoria's mother-in-law. The dress was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, combining vintage techniques with subtle modern elements. But more than that, it represented everything Isabella had become, a bridge between worlds, a transformer, of the old into something newly beautiful. "It's time," Madame Rossi said softly, appearing at her side. The older woman was dressed elegantly in black, her silver hair perfectly styled. "Are you ready?" Isabella smoothed her own dress, a stunning creation they had worked on together, incorporating some of the same innovative techniques that would be showcased in the collection. "I think I've been ready for this my whole life." The main room was filled with the city's elite, along with fashion journalists, investors, and several international buyers who had flown in specifically for the event. Isabella spotted the Chens near the center of the room. The merger had been signed that morning, making this evening a double celebration. Alexander stood talking with James Chen, but his eyes found her the moment she entered the room. He excused himself and made his way to her side, looking devastatingly handsome in his perfectly tailored suit. "Nervous?" he asked softly, his hand finding the small of her back in that familiar, comforting gesture. "Surprisingly, no." She leaned into his touch slightly. "Everything feels right, like all the pieces have finally fallen into place." "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria Sterling's voice carried across the room, "if I could have your attention." The presentation began with a brief history of Maria Elena's original atelier, told through a series of vintage photographs and preserved garments. Isabella watched the crowd's reactions as they learned about her grandmother's legacy, seeing understanding dawn in their eyes as the story unfolded into the present. Then came the reveal of the new collection. Each piece told a story. The marriage of tradition and innovation, the respect for craftsmanship combined with modern sensibilities. The crowd murmured appreciatively as they examined the detailed work, the subtle integration of smart fabrics, the perfect balance of old and new. When Victoria's mother-in-law's gown was unveiled, there was an audible gasp. The woman herself had tears in her eyes as she touched the fabric that so perfectly echoed the gowns of her youth, while incorporating elements that made it thoroughly modern. "This," Alexander stepped forward to address the crowd, "is the future of luxury fashion. Not just beautiful clothes, but pieces that tell stories, that bridge generations, that honor the past while embracing the future." He turned to Isabella, his eyes shining with pride. "And there's no one better to lead this vision than Isabella Martinez." Isabella moved to stand beside him, her heart full. "When I started this journey, I was invisible, just another person in the background of other people's lives. But sometimes the most beautiful transformations come from the most unexpected places." She went on to outline their vision for the future, the new building that would house their expanded operations, the apprenticeship program they were establishing with Madame Rossi, the integration with Chen Global's international markets. As she spoke, she could feel the energy in the room shift. These weren't just society people humoring a social climber anymore. These were business leaders and fashion experts recognizing a powerful new force in their world. The rest of the evening passed in a whirlwind of congratulations, orders, and partnership discussions. Sarah Chen had already commissioned 3 pieces for Michelle's upcoming wedding. Victoria Sterling was discussing an exclusive line for her charity events. Even the international buyers were placing orders, impressed by the combination of traditional craftsmanship and innovative design. It was well past midnight when the last guests departed. Isabella stood on Victoria's terrace, looking out over the city lights, feeling the cool breeze on her skin. Alexander joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "You did it," he murmured into her hair. "We did it," she corrected, leaning back against his chest. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "Oh, I think you could have." He turned her to face him. "You're extraordinary, Isabella Martinez. I just had the good fortune to recognize it." "Speaking of recognition," she smiled up at him. "I have something to show you." She led him back inside to where one of the mannequins stood slightly apart from the others. On it was a man's suit jacket, expertly tailored, but with subtle details that caught the light in unusual ways. "The first piece in our men's collection," she explained. "I've been working on it in secret. It's made with the same techniques as my grandmother's best work, but with modern innovations. Traditional and forward-thinking, just like its intended wearer." Alexander touched the fabric reverently. "It's perfect. Just like us." She wrapped her arms around his neck. Different worlds coming together to create something new. He leaned down to kiss her, there in the quiet of the empty showroom. When they parted, his eyes were serious. "Marry me." Isabella's heart skipped. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated. "Be my partner in everything. Business, fashion, life. Let's build our empire together properly." She pretended to consider it, though her heart was already singing. "Any conditions with this proposal?" He laughed, remembering their early negotiations. "Just one. Be happy. That's all I ever want. For you." "In that case," she pulled him down for another kiss. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Later that night, as they sat on the terrace of his penthouse, sharing a late supper and making plans for their future, Isabella thought about how far she'd come. From the invisible housekeeper to a respected businesswoman and designer. From someone who served coffee in board meetings to someone who commanded them. But more than that, she thought about how she hadn't just transformed herself. She had helped transform Alexander too. Together, they had become something neither of them could have been alone, complete. As the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Isabella smiled, thinking of all the beautiful patterns they would create together in the years to come. Some would be made of fabric and thread, others of business deals and partnerships, but the most important ones would be woven from love, trust, and the courage to see the potential in unexpected places. And that, she knew, was the most beautiful design of all.